Afternoon, everybody, and welcome back to the next exciting track that we've got for this afternoon. And we are very excited to have a set of topics on API products and markets from a suite of people who are all experts and leaders in their specific industries, who are knee-deep in the API realization of their business strategies, particularly as they transform from perhaps traditional organizations into embracing new digitally enabled ways of working. And they're going to be talking to us about moving from plays in their traditional business models, their traditional ecosystems, into the opportunities that they're reaching out into others. And there's no one else better to kick us off this afternoon than Olli Kilpeläinen and delighted to have you join us this afternoon, and really looking forward to your talk.
Thank you, Claire. Great to be here. Yeah, as Claire mentioned, what I want to tell you is a story of industrial transformation and really how a traditional company is going through digitalization to address changing needs from the customers. And I'm going to tell this story from the perspective of Abloy. It's a company which has been around already over 100 of years and is very known, especially to Finnish customers. And they're really seeing, and we are seeing, how the industry is changing and how we need to start thinking of value creation and business differently. So I'm going to run you through a bit of the context of what's happening in this industry, the industry which we call physical security quite often, and how this company is going beyond the physical keys and locks that you're knowing towards API economy, ecosystems, partnerships, and digital value creation. Couple more words about myself. So I have a background of roughly 17 years working on different digital products. And I had the privilege of working on quite a few different industries. And there are certain, shall I say, principles that you can see across the industries and across the different companies that are really going through the change in their business models. So I worked on mobile phones that definitely went through a lot of change after I started there. Cloud services, creating digital services for different industries, virtual reality. Then I also hobbled in drones and robotics for a while. And the last few years, I've been working on the digitalization of built environment. And that really means smart buildings, smart cities. And this is an industry that's very interesting, very traditional. A lot of different kind of companies building their solutions, their products and services there. And there, actually last year, I was in this conference talking about another manufacturing company doing elevators. And this year, I'm going to talk about access management and security from Abloy perspective. And maybe highlight some of the similarities you see in corporations when they embark on this journey towards APIs and digitalization. Perhaps the biggest driver for change in this environment and industry is urbanization. I mean, based on UN forecast, and according to some forecasts even more, 68% of people will be living in urban areas in cities by 2050. This is a huge driver for economic change. And it really means that we need to start building infrastructure and services in the cities in a different way. Never before have we had so many different people ramping up and going to smaller spaces and needing different kind of services and having problems that are given rise from this change. So that's a very big driver for this. And naturally, when we are talking about physical security and we are talking about even more people coming to close proximity, then demand for security solutions is ever growing and changing as well. This comes from the fact that when you have all these people around and you start having the digital services around you, those buildings are getting smarter, the cities are getting smarter. You want to secure your loved ones, of course, your homes, your property, and everything around that. So really having the safety is maybe the number one thing, as we have also learned from demand hierarchies and things like that. In addition to the urbanization, also people are getting more and more wealthy, especially in the Western countries. People have more money to spend on services and additional value creators. Then we also see, of course, technology. Technology is everywhere. It's evolving, it's changing, it's affecting all the industries out there. All the consumers are starting to demand technology. And that's what this conference, of course, is mainly about. And also we are seeing the environmental values, sustainability, your carbon footprint, super important aspects to take into consideration, especially when you now have more options enabled by the technology, that you can actually start thinking how to reduce your carbon footprint. And then in our industry, in the security side, especially the standards and the guidelines are a big changing factor. Whether you're talking about standards for security in physical space, cybersecurity acts, for example, in USA or Europe, or even IoT-specific standards that are being driven through, those are really changing the playing field where we're actually making our business. And that's good, and that's giving another room for improvement and growth. And all these mega trends together are really what makes it so exciting to actually work in such an industry, because it's very clear that a change is happening. You need to adapt to this change, and there's no other alternative. It's not a nice to have thing, it's a must for these companies, including ours. What that also means is that you need to start thinking about innovation a bit differently. You're used to building certain ways of working, certain corporate culture, and what worked 100 years ago might not be quite as prevailing anymore now in this year and today. But you need to actually start thinking out of the box and start changing the way you're building business. And of course, when you think about all these people moving to the cities, you start thinking about this new value you want to create. You also need to think who you are creating it for. And again, if you think about Abloy, and you might again think about the physical keys, the locks, you could think that aren't they pretty much the same always? But that is definitely not the case. So the customer needs, the customer requirements we have are heavily depending on the business vertical we are working on. Whether you're living in your own home, you have a private owned house, or you're living in an apartment building and want your deliveries to reach you. But if you then compare that to, let's say, a bank, highly secure place, or a machine room in a telecom site, or an energy infrastructure, or even trains and transportation, you still have the same need for the physical safety, and you have the need for access management, but the customer-specific requirements are very varying based on that. And that's, of course, something companies like ours have already realized some time ago. But then when you start moving to digital solutions, and you're realizing that you're building, let's say, an application on top of those locking solutions, you start realizing that these companies that you're serving in these different industries, they're also working with other service providers. And you start realizing that maybe your customers actually need the services provided by other companies as well. So what comes as a natural follow-up to building your segment-specific product portfolio and services is the need to integrate things. And that, in a way, brings us to the business ecosystem integration. What this means is that when you have, for example, let's say an office space, and you have your employee badges, and you have your access management system used to handle who gets to go where, you realize there's a lot of things around it. Let's say you have a whole security personnel site there. You have security companies. They really need to get an overview and audit trails of what's happening around you, who has gone where and what's happening. Most likely they want some kind of video surveillance as well. And you need to bring these together. Maybe they even want to integrate business applications like ERP or logistics planning. And that also needs to interact with how you are building the access management. Again, how people are moving around, who gets where. So you start building and having the need for integrations. And as you can imagine from my explanation of the verticals, these integrations are starting to be quite different based on what kind of customer you have. In an office space, the security personnel have a certain approach to things. What kind of companies are there, how they operate, what kind of premises they need. But then when you jump to an airport, it's quite a different scenario. And this slide shows an example of, it's actually one of our products, but I used it as an example to show how, in a way, the different things need to cooperate in the building in order to create the value for the different users. So sure, again, if you're thinking about a building site like the one in the picture, might have a couple of different buildings, different scenarios, regardless of what's the industry case. And of course, you want to have the secure doors. You want to understand who has the key, who can enter a certain part of the building, for example. But there's so many things around it. When someone arrives to the site driving a truck, for example, they bring a delivery. They don't want to get out of the truck to open the doors. Maybe they need to have a mobile opening for the gateways. And actually, maybe your customer wants to understand which car is coming. They need license plate registration. When they enter the site, you want to have the video surveillance in place. Then you want to have other critical systems in case of emergencies, like fire alarms, crime alarms. And of course, you want to link this together with the access management, which is telling who has been where and who is allowed to go to places. And in case of those emergencies, you need to figure out how to really fast exit the building as well. You need to make sure that's really automated. You want the elevators to be linked to the access management system, so you know, again, who's going where and also how to get out in case of an emergency. And all of this is, of course, linked to understanding who is allowed to enter the site. You might have ID creations. You have different tags you're handing to people based on their access rights. You might have mechanical keys together with the digital keys. So again, you have to manage who gets what and handle all of those operations. So all in all, what you need to do is you need to actually start interacting with multiple different systems around there. And for companies like ours, of course, we cannot and we should not try to build all of this ourselves. So that's what I meant about the business integration. Of course, our company also has realized already some time ago that these integrations are needed. But then if you create your vertical integration to one of these use cases, let's say video surveillance, and you build the integration one-off to an office system, then you build an integration to another vertical, a bank, for example, and another bank has different scenarios and so forth. You're starting to have a lot of integrations in place. And then you realize that maintaining these integrations is a problem because you start to have so many different scenarios and how you keep those up and running. So then starts the thinking about how to, in a way, make the integrations more professional. And this was the starting point of talking about APIs. In a way, the first level of thinking for APIs was how to make integrations more professional, easy to maintain, flexible for the customer, and hopefully also enable more systems to be integrated to your scenario. And then when you start thinking about the API approach, you start realizing that actually maybe you can go a bit further. So instead of just having these easier integrations for your user interface, like in this example, you also want to start looking at the ecosystem side. And this is, I'm showing something that is very new for our company. It's just something we launched last year. But what we really want to do is we want to build an ecosystem of access. And in this case, ecosystem of keyless access, which we call in Cumulus. What this means is that our locks, the different kind of locks and door openers, whether they are electric locks from the offices, padlocks that you might need in server rooms or trains, to different cylinder locks and so forth, we want to make all of them connected. So our locks are now becoming IoT devices. And therefore, if we move to the keyless access, and we no longer want to give those physical keys to everyone accessing the spaces, what we're actually building, our software pipeline, is really about handing out digital access rights, digital keys. So therefore, our software is really figuring out how to keep tags of who has digital key to what area and when those should be used. And the next step of thinking, of course, is that you no longer pick where you integrate. But because we now started talking about APIs and we create SDKs around them, then our customers get to choose what companies they use. So we are moving away from the thinking that, hey, here's our solution, one that fits all, but now the customer gets to decide what kind of systems they want, whether it's a booking system, they want to have certain reporting. I mentioned the different security systems in different industries. So many different cases where the customer really would like to decide what kind of interfaces they use, what kind of end-user facing applications they have, for example. So now with the ecosystem thinking, we can start addressing those, unlike before. And this is, of course, a big change in the way the corporation is thinking. At the same time, in our case, we are still building those very important, crucial security applications as well, the access management systems that are fully fledged and can handle the whole building site, as I mentioned. But the big change is that we don't always try to say that our solution fits everything, but we give customer the power to choose. That's, to me, the main thing when you start thinking about the ecosystems after you went through the hurdle of creating productized APIs. And that also opens then opportunities. So you can actually start thinking the ecosystem even wider. When you started from our physical products, our digital cloud services, our access management systems, but then you can start building the partnerships around them. Maybe you are now able to combine more physical products in the same ecosystem. We're talking about IoT devices after all. In that smart building, you're going to have a lot more of those. And you start having partners who fulfill the access needs for the different verticals. So it's opening a completely different way of thinking. And I believe that companies go through this thinking in stages, as you could decipher from my thinking. So you start from, let's say, the manufacturing side. Then you move towards services, whether they're keeping your hardware up and running or something else. And then with the digital evolution, you get digital products, maybe digital services, and you start integrating them. After the integration, you need to think about the APIs, productizing those APIs. At some point, your company starts thinking about a platform. If I build APIs around my cloud service, for example, I had a software as a service model already, then maybe I can build a platform model as well. How would that work? And then you grow this ecosystem of partners I was talking about around this platform. And it's not enough to even convince your own company how you could consider these business models. And I'm not claiming this is fitting for everyone. But even in your case, if your corporation has chosen a certain path, what you also need to take into account is, are your customers on the same journey? So quite often you need to wait until your customers are also far enough in their transformation before you can start pitching about the ecosystem thinking or your platform approach to them. And this is again something that I find very exciting when I deal with our customers, to see how far are they. Perhaps they have just started their digitalization journey. And then we go from integration to APIs and start talking about software platforms. So it takes a very different level of maturity from the different counterparts in the industry as well to get that far. But the ecosystem is also one step of the journey. And unfortunately, it's quite often even more complex. There isn't just one ecosystem. I've been now talking about smart buildings, smart cities. Then there's the building automation or operations in the building. There's actually a lot of different companies within that space who have gone through the same evolution. So these companies also believe that they can build their platform and their ecosystem around it. And that's totally fine. And if everyone wants to be the sun in their own universe, that's going to be slightly challenging. So your company needs to start thinking also in which ecosystems they are participants and which ecosystem they want to be the hub. In my example, for example, I drew the smart building ecosystem there. There are companies who are working on the energy optimization in the building. They form their own energy ecosystem. Then you have the building automation ecosystem consisting of multiple companies building the automation tools. And they have their own ecosystem and interact together. And then you have, of course, the security and access ecosystem as one of these bubbles in the smart building. So then the question is that if you really want to give the customer the choice, how do you interact between these different ecosystems, the ecosystem of ecosystems? And that's really a strategic decision and also goes to how you productize those APIs of yours. And we as an Abloy, we are basically really now starting our journey towards API economy. We are journeying through these different steps in the digital transformation, as I mentioned. And it is not always a smooth sailing. So you need to find the path how you can reach that and reach the island and climb to the mountain where you're actually fulfilling your customers' specific needs. And again, by giving them the choice how to do that. And how do you get that scalable? And on your path there, you have the iceberg on the way. You have your old way of integrating things together. How you have used to talking about integration with your customers and with your suppliers and so forth. And underneath that are many things you need to figure out that are maybe not so visible to outside or the customer-facing people. For example, what are the tools you're using? What is your integration process when you move from point-to-point integrations to APIs? What kind of API product management you use? You talk about technologies like API management suddenly, and that's completely a new concept for people who are not used to talking about this. How do you handle billing? You used to sell your own solutions, end-to-end solutions, but now you're actually selling parts of the value proposition and complementing that with partners. How do you handle contracts, support, and eventually how do you handle the partnerships, which is a completely different kind of business relationship than you had before. So what this really means is that the whole corporation actually has to change their way of thinking. The legal department needs to understand we're doing contracts differently. Your marketing needs to start talking about not just your own solutions, but how you enable even complementing solutions from different industry players together. Your IT needs to open data paths that they usually didn't open outside. Sales needs to talk about partial value propositions and how you build the whole value proposition with different companies. And how you do operations, onboard users, onboard customers, and so forth. And of course, the partners themselves and the developers underneath. How does the partner or customer developer actually use your API? In most cases, in an industry transformation like this is a group of people who are completely ignored until you get to the point where you actually start addressing them in your first business discussions with the partners. But all in all, I think this is an extremely exciting journey. And we are now navigating those waters. And of course, there's quite a few things to still figure out for us as well. But I think that's definitely a way how we do digitalization in other industries as well, but especially in ours, where the changes are changing so rapidly. We have the different things, we have the different verticals that we want to address, and we want to create secure cities, secure buildings for everyone. I hope you enjoyed listening to this industry story. And if you have some questions, we'd be lovely to hear those. Thank you.
Olli, thank you so much. I always love your enthusiasm and real inspiration, if you like, of this image of the ecosystem of ecosystems. I think you explain so well to people that what maybe at the face of it seems so almost chaotic, that's becoming more and more kind of this massive amount of complexity, and you provide this kind of structure. And I really love the mindset shift scale for organizations. And I'm not sure that we've really got a lot of time for questions, but I'd love to perhaps just get your last kind of observation on where you see some of the biggest barriers are for taking people from each step along that journey. Is it behavioral, organizational, technical skills?
I actually believe it starts from the behavioral side. So like I said, the technical hurdles, of course, those can be big as well, but in my opinion, those are easier to solve. It's really about how you think about the value creation, which is at the heart of any product, right? Like I said, that whether it's your top management, how you talk about it, that you're no longer creating things on your own, and how do you change the thinking model for your sales? And like you said, it looks so complex if you throw all the things at once. So you have to do in a way, step by step, and start from small. What is an API, and then how are ecosystems formed? And if you start with that complicated system of ecosystems, like you said, then quite often it goes, let's say, too far, too fast. So you need to, in a way, work with the whole organization and try to get this mindset first. And then when you have the mindset, the technical challenges, in my opinion, will be easier to solve.
Big message, communication, mindset. Thank you, Olli, as ever. Delight to have you back here at Apidays, and we look forward to seeing you at futures and the future ones, and all of the very best success for you at the team at Abloy.
Thank you.
Thank you, Olli.